Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. It's a delight to be back in Des Moines. How many of you know this little factoid? The first time I was in Des Moines, Iowa was in March of 1981. I was on the show called the Variety Club Telethon with Blake Emmons. You might know that man. Big hair, bad attitude, and it's great to be back in town. I haven't been back since except for one gig last year. I live in Canada. I came down from Saskatchewan yesterday. In 1976, I was in grade 11 at the Yorkton Regional High School when I heard my first ever motivational speaker, and to say it changed my life would be a complete understatement. So really, that's a great start to a speech, isn't it? Because that day, I'll never forget it. It's like it was yesterday. We had to go to our gym. It was just a normal day. You probably had speakers when you were young. We didn't know what to expect. I was missing math. That was good. Went down to our gym, sat in the bleachers. The guy came in. He was from the United States, which was a big deal for us because that was a long time ago. The speaking industry was brand new. It wasn't like it is today where there's lots of us, and it's so nice to see so many of us here today with you. This guy got into our gym, and I sat in the bleachers, and I was expecting nothing. But by 10 minutes into the program, I felt like my life had changed, like I was never going to forget that morning, that man and his message. And here we are in 2015. Every time I do a speech, I make a reference to that guy because it was a moving day in my life. So you might be imagining that this was the man that inspired me to go on to choose a career in the professional speaking industry. And if that was the way the story actually goes, it would be a great story, wouldn't it? The fact is, I remember him. I didn't say I liked him. In fact, quite frankly, as a 16-year-old, it was the perfect word. I hated him. And it took me 10 minutes to figure out why. This was the happiest human being I'd ever seen in my entire life, and he was so happy, he was actually annoying. Do you know anybody like that? They're just happy all the time. Don't you want to smack people like that? Of course, imagine my frustration. I have no arms. All I can do is be resentful. Anyway, I sat in the audience. I was trying to gain something positive. Honestly, I remember really working at this because we were expected to get something out of that day. But the fact is, he just kept talking and talking. He went on for an hour. It was getting really, really hard to listen to. So it was really dramatic when at the 30-minute mark, in the middle of a sentence no less, he stopped. It didn't look like he had meant to stop. It almost looked like he hit an emotional moment. You ever see that on stage when a speaker just thinks of something and out pops an idea? Well, that's exactly what happened in that moment. He got real quiet, real intense. He looked at all of us teenagers and he said, "Boys and girls, I just turned 50. And one thing about turning 50 that I learned this year is it gives you some perspective. I've been thinking a lot about my past, and I want to share a lot of ideas with you today, but if you remember anything, if you take home anything today, remember these words. These are the best days of your life." Now, I don't know what your adolescence was like, but I want you to imagine what I'm thinking at that exact moment in time in Yorkton, Saskatchewan in 1976. That would be bad news. Can you picture my reality? I was 16 years old, and I had no arms. That's kind of a big deal, yes? By comparison, bad hair day, maybe not so big, no arms, kind of large, and I was growing up in rural Canada where nothing ever happened, and I was butt ugly. No, we're not supposed to call people butt ugly. I understand the politically correct, but when you're 16, that's the terminology, isn't it? And it wasn't just the arms. I had a mullet. That was just a really bad idea. It made me even uglier, made me look like a Pez dispenser. Can you imagine? I had really bad acne. You can still see the scars on my neck. That's just embarrassing when you're 16, whether you're a boy or a girl. I had really big teeth. You know the kind they call buck teeth? So I got braces. They fixed them up nice and straight now. But at 16, imagine that one alone. Having really big buck teeth, and my name was Alvin. Shall we chat about the frickin' chipmunks now? Seriously, that's a true story. And why do I bring it up? Because I'm just going to say this. Don't be offended. I don't know that a lot of people like motivational speakers. It's kind of insulting, isn't it? That we need to come in and motivate people. I don't believe that's what I do. Of course, we have short times today with you, so you can imagine that we have long stories. I am a storyteller. That is what I do. I set moods for conventions. I send people into one or coming out of one with an idea, yes, here it is, cliche time, that there's really no such word as can't. And I grew up with that expression. I know it's cheesy, but can you imagine what my life might really be like? I have no choice but talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I mean, can you imagine how many times I've heard this? What happened to you? Can you imagine how long ago I got tired of talking about it? But the fact is, it dominates the scenery. Because when people see me, that's the first thing they think about. Now, I want you to picture, because you're smart people, to imagine that I live a pretty normal life. You probably figured that out. But let me give you a perfect example. Yesterday, as a speaker, all of us speakers in the room and all of you that travel know what this is like. I left my home. Actually, I'm not at home right now. I'm at our lake in Saskatchewan, a beautiful place that we spend our summers at. And I drove 3 hours to get to an airport, to fly down to Minneapolis, to fly here, rented a car so I could get to the venue today. I like renting cars. It's not that I'm against shuttles. I don't do cabs. They never stop when you go. So I rented a car. It's just a regular car. In fact, they gave me a really little bad Toyota Corolla. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. But I just steer with my right foot on the wheel, my left foot on the gas. All I need is automatic transmission. I can drive any car. Can you imagine the look you get when you walk up to the rental counter and you give them your driver's license and you wait for them to give them the keys to your car? It's priceless. It's like drive-thrus. Those are hilarious. Can you imagine getting to the window of a drive? That'll be $6. Here! Guy said to me one day, it's funnier if you're in the car behind you. Right, because all you see is the foot going out the window, a couple of feet grabbing the drink. Am I making fun of being handicapped? No, I'm making fun of me, and I'm not handicapped. See, it's quite interesting. When I take a look at the resonance of my life, and it has resonance, it has energy, I get a lot of credit for all the amazing things that I do. But I'm not the amazing one. I was a thalidomide baby. I don't know if you know what that is or not, but thalidomide was the morning sickness medication that deformed about 17,000 babies around the world in the early 1960s. It wasn't big in America because it was never licensed here, because ironically, and we just lost her a couple of weeks ago, a Canadian doctor with the FDA would not approve it because she didn't believe that the drug company that was trying to peddle thalidomide was doing it in the right way. Well, that's a long story. You can look it up if you want to know the details. But the fact of the matter is, it wasn't about being born without arms. It was the stigma that was attached to the idea that being born this way, being born with deformities, was going to dictate and predict the future of our lives. Now, you can well imagine I've got an inspiring story, and I'm proud to tell that story, but it's not my story. In fact, I think when I was 16 years old, the reason that I didn't like who I was because I hadn't yet come to grow into who I was going to be. I was a typical adolescent. They didn't like who I was. I thought I was a victim. And then on August 23rd, 1985, which was just a couple of days ago, my son celebrated his 30th birthday. I had my one and only child, and that changed everything because it was the first day in my life that I ever actually thought about how my own mom and dad must have felt the first time they held me. I wonder how that day went. My mom was 55 years old the first time she held me, and my dad was 53, and I was an orphan living in Yorkton, Saskatchewan's hospital because on the fourth day of my life, my birth family gave me away. Now, I'm not asking for sympathy. It's just a fact of life that in 1960, we had a very different take on people and their differences than we do in 2015. And we've grown into that because our society has moved forward with thoughts, with writing, with books, with knowledge. And I think at times with taking chances on what we can learn to be better, not only as businesses, not only as communities, but better as people. I want to tell you my favorite story. In 1974, I was a very difficult adolescent, and you can well imagine I was having a very difficult time trying to figure out what I was going to be. I'd learned to use my feet when I was an infant, but that just wasn't what this was all about. I learned to go to regular school, which was an amazing thing to have happen in 1966 when I started going. But one day my mom got a phone call, went exactly like this. Mrs. Law, my name is Blaine McClary. I'm the band director for the Yorkton City Band Program. Do you have a son named Alvin? Yeah, we do. Why are you calling? Well, Mrs. Law, all 11-year-olds in Yorkton have to take a music aptitude test. And your son got 96%. Wow, that's a good mark. It is, Mrs. Law. That's why we're calling. Do you think he'd like to be in the band? What band? School band? Yeah, school band, Mrs. Law. No, I know. It's just kind of a weird thing to hear from somebody. What kind of instrument did you have in mind? Well, Mrs. Law, we normally don't do this, but I'm going to give your son an exclusive offer with that kind of mark. Why don't you bring him up to the high school and he can pick any instrument he wants? Mrs. Law, that sounds very generous. I can't wait. You know, this sounds good, Mr. McClary. I just got to tell you, I got a really important question. Have you met him? No, it's got his phone number here. I'm kind of going through a list. Well, sir, it's kind of an important thing that I tell you right now that Alvin sort of has no arms. Hello? You know, Mrs. Law, nobody told me that. I'm really embarrassed right now. I wish someone would have mentioned that, but you know what? You say hi to your son. I think this is a silly idea. I made a mistake. I apologize. Have a nice day. And he hung up the phone. Now, would you not agree that most people, I'm not trying to be judgmental here, would only do the minimum amount? A lot of people out there are happy and satisfied with just living everyday lives. They don't try to extend things. They don't try to push the limit. But in my life, I've been very lucky. Not only was I taken home by foster parents who raised me as their own child, and my mom's attitude was totally, profoundly amazing. I wish you could have met her. But even more importantly, it wasn't just the people that loved me in my life. It was the people that chose to enter my life to take me to another level of ability. And it came in surprising ways. I didn't know about that phone call. All I know is I walked in the house one day and my mom was beaming. She had a great smile, ugly teeth, great smile. But I walked in the house and she said, "Honey, you're not going to believe this. You're going to be in the band." What? She didn't tell me about the first phone call because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. She said, I got to tell you a story, but we got to go to the high school. So as we're driving to the high school, she tells me the story of 6 weeks earlier of Mr. McClary phoning and inviting me to join the band and then finding out I had no arms and quickly hanging up. But then that morning he called back. He'd come up with an instrument that I could play in the band. Who knew? So we go to the school, and I meet Mr. McClary, nice guy. I met 2 more teachers at the high school. The woodworking teacher, his name was Mr. Wood. I just always loved telling that. And we go into the back of the school to the vocational wing where they taught the trades. We go into this room where there's a funny-looking chair, not a chair like this, a teacher's chair. The right arm had been sawed off. The left arm had a metal rod bolted to the side with a big clamp welded on the top. And there was another one on the back, and on the floor was a long black case. Mr. McClary opens up the case, takes out, puts together and inserts in these clamps a trombone. A trombone, for God's sake. And like a game show host, he went, "What do you think?" "Well, what do you think?" I thought. I was like 14. I thought it was the stupidest looking thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. "Well, can you move the slide with your foot?" "Yeah, I can do that." "Can you make this noise?" "Yeah." Can you do it at the same time?" Well, this noise came out. 11-year-olds love noise. So I played a little bit, locked the slide, and I'll never forget that moment. You should have been in that room. Mr. McClary said, "This is what you're going to play in the band, boy." You know, my life may have changed when I was adopted by foster parents. My life may have been profoundly impacted by being born without arms. But Mr. McClary changed my life that day, not because he felt sorry for me, but he gave me an opportunity to investigate what is truly possible when you overcome challenge. See, what I believe is challenge is something we all face. How we get over it. Thank you very much for having me here.